Hi, welcome to our daily encounter. In Job chapter 29, we have this heart-wrenching description of the way things were before Job encountered these sufferings. And it really does break your heart to see what Job was missing out on now that he had been brought so low. He talks about the relationship that he had with God, talks about his lamp had shone over his head. He says that friendship with God was over his tent. The Almighty was yet with him. He had a strong relationship with God, and him and God were like friends. He felt like he had lost that. And then that real heartbreaking statement when he says, "And my children were around me." Remember, his children had died as part of the tragedy that he endured. And he's remembering back when he had his children around him. He remembers the great blessings that he had. His steps were bathed in butter, and rocks poured out for him streams of oil. And he goes on to talk about his relationship that he had with the townspeople. How people respected him. They looked up to him. He was in a high social status, and he was in a position to help the poor. He was feet for the lame. He was eyes for the blind. He was able to help those who were in need. And now he himself was the one in need. And all of this was lost. All this was stripped away from Job. And it's not only that he lost these things, but also he gained such sufferings. Even his body was touched with the boils. And he was rejected by the same people who had respected him before. So this is just a really, really sad part of Job, and it continues through chapter 30. But there's something that brought consolation to Job. And there's this little flickering light in the darkness that Job is in right now. And that is that he had walked in the integrity of his heart, that he had maintained his righteousness through it all. Yes, Job had to endure the weight of physical pain, social rejection, property loss, the loss of his own children. He had to bear the weight of all those things, but there's one thing he didn't have to bear the weight of, and that is guilt for his sin. Even though his friends were trying to place that guilt on him, he could look at his life and recognize the fact that he was guiltless. He was blameless before God. And that helped him in the sufferings. As a matter of fact, in chapter 6, as we go back towards the beginning of the book of Job, in verse 10, he had just been talking about the sufferings. He says, "The terrors of God are arrayed against me." He talks about my soul refuses to touch, these different types of food. Anyways, he says in verse 10, he says, "But it is still my consolation, and I rejoice in unsparing pain, that I have not denied the words of the Holy One." And perhaps that's the only thing through all of this that brought Job any joy at all. The fact that he had not strayed from the words of God and denied the words of God. And that should teach us a lesson, that we need to live a life of total submission to God, to surrender every moment to Him, to continually walk in the Spirit, to continually develop and cultivate a strong relationship with God. Will it guarantee that we will not go into sufferings? Absolutely not. That's what we're reading about here in Job. If nothing else proves that that's not true, Job proves that that's not true. Even righteous people suffer. That's kind of one of the main themes of this book. However, what it will do for us is give us consolation and even some joy, perhaps, in our sufferings as we look back with a clean conscience and being freed of any guilt that would add to the sufferings that we are going through. You know, a person who sins and is disciplined by the Lord not only has the sufferings that he or she is having to go through, but also the guilt of their sins. And the knowledge of knowing that I put myself in this predicament. Even if, they accept the Lord and through Jesus Christ, that the guilt is taken away through His blood, still, they have to look at their situation and know that they were the ones that caused it, that they're bearing the consequences of their own actions. And even though spiritually they're free from their sins, when it comes to this earth, they're still dealing with the consequences. And that adds sorrow to your sufferings, to know that you were the cause of what you're going through. And so let's use these chapters that we read today as motivation to live a righteous life before God, and to walk step by step under His direction, moment by moment, in submission to His will, and second by second under the direction of His Spirit, walking by the Spirit, so that we can have confidence on the day when we enter into sufferings, if it so happens that we do. And we can look back with a clean conscience, a clean heart, knowing that we have followed the Lord's will, and that these sufferings we can bear up. These sufferings, even in these sufferings, we can have consolation that we have not denied the Lord our God. Well, I thank you guys for listening in today. I love you guys. Hope you guys have a great day. God bless.